Hey guys, tonight we slip into the soft, muddy edge of the ancient Valley of Mexico, beneath the drifting clouds and under the ever-watchful moon, to explore something wonderfully strange and deeply boring in the best possible way. You're standing at the edge of Lake Texcoco, barefoot, the mud cool between your toes, with frogs croaking low lullabies from somewhere nearby. There's mist hovering over the surface of the water, and in that pale glow you can just make out dark, long rectangles that seem to float. These are Chinampas, what you'll come to know as floating gardens though, spoiler, they don't actually float. But they do grow tomatoes, and they do feed empires. You're here in the early hours, long before anyone else stirs, when even the birds seem hesitant to announce themselves. Everything is soft, slow, slightly damp. You exhale, the breath curling into the morning like steam from a kettle. The sky above is that pre-dawn navy, ink spilled across the clouds, and the only thing moving are the silver ripples where a fish broke the surface moments ago. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's drifting off where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly across a series of damp wooden planks laid over the soft ground, half bridge, half pier, half something else entirely. The world feels like it's been paused. Behind you, Tenochtitlan sleeps, at least for now. The great island city built in the center of this lake glimmers faintly with cooking fires, like a constellation dragged down to earth. But out here, this is the edge. The border between city and lake, between civilization and something older, wetter and vastly more vegetal. You reach the edge of a Chinampa, a long rectangular plot of land jutting into the water like a raft made from earth. And in a way, it is. Chinampas aren't natural. Aztec gardeners built them, piling up layers of lakebed muck, decayed plant matter, and woven reeds to form these artificial islands. The name Chinampa roughly translates to something like square made of canes, which sounds like the sort of thing your uncle might build at a weekend camping trip. But here, it's engineering genius. You kneel at the edge, dipping your fingers into the rich black earth. It's spongy, fragrant, and speckled with flecks of root and worm castings. And underneath it all is the water, always the water. The lake doesn't just border the garden, it runs under and through it. It seeps up from below, which means this soil is always moist, always fed, always fertile. It's like nature's version of a self-watering flower pot, except massive and without a price tag. Now here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. By the time the Aztecs were rising to power in the 14th century, Chinampa farming was already an old technique, developed centuries earlier by the Xochimilca people. The Aztecs didn't invent it, they just perfected it. And they did so on a scale that boggles the sleepy brain. Thousands of these garden plots, some as long as football fields, lined the lakes of the valley, producing enough maize, beans, squash and, yes, tomatoes, to feed hundreds of thousands of people. You shift your weight and look out across the foggy lake. The Chinampas stretch like green, misty fingers, each bordered by narrow canals just wide enough for a canoe. They aren't symmetrical. Nature rarely is. But there's an order here, a logic so deeply entwined with the lake that it's hard to tell where the plants stop and the water begins. Here's a quirky tidbit for your inner trivia goblin. Some Chinampa farmers used to talk to their plants, not in the "you're doing great little guy" sort of way, but with full ritual chants. They believed the vegetables would grow straighter, fuller and tastier if serenaded properly, especially if you included offerings like pulque, a mildly alcoholic fermented sap. Drunk tomatoes? Maybe. But it's the thought that counts, and now the scholarly debate that puts a wrinkle in this peaceful mud bath. Historians still argue whether Chinampa agriculture could have sustained Tenochtitlan on its own, or whether it required massive imports from outer provinces. Some claim the productivity of these gardens was so high they could churn out multiple harvests a year. Others say the Aztecs relied heavily on tribute crops, and the Chinampas were more symbolic than central. The truth? Probably a bit of both. Chinampas fed bellies and egos alike. You shuffle along the canal's edge, a sleepy gardener without a plan. Ducks paddle silently past, Somewhere behind you, a heron lifts off in slow motion, wings dragging dew from the reeds. The sun hasn't broken the horizon yet, but the sky has softened into the color of warm tea. You feel it, the calm before the daily heat, the stillness before a city wakes. Tomatoes don't grow well in swamps, at least not naturally. But here they are, thick vines twisting up from mounded earth, each heavy with clusters of firm, green-shouldered fruits. The Aztecs didn't just make floating gardens, they made floating tomato islands. And over the next few hours, well, 4 of them, you'll come to understand how this all worked, why it mattered, and how a garden on a lake shaped an empire. You pause by one of the tomato mounds, crouching to run your fingers along the curved stems. The leaves are rough like cat tongues, and each vine curls in determined little spirals, clinging to vertical supports fashioned from slender willow poles. The Aztecs weren't about to let their vegetables sprawl wildly. Nope, these were tidy, upright citizens of the Chinampa community, staked and strung and ready for harvest. Very few of the fruits are blushing red. Most are still green. You pluck one gently and give it a sniff. Sharp, sweet, tangy, with a faint echo of sun-warmed stone. It's a quiet moment, but make no mistake, this is high-tech farming by 14th century standards. The Aztecs didn't just plant things willy-nilly. Chinampa construction followed a surprisingly specific recipe. First, you'd stake out a rectangle in the shallow lake with long wooden poles. Then you'd weave a sort of basket fence between them using reeds and begin filling it. Mud, rotted vegetation, manure, whatever gunk you could scoop from the lake bed. The real secret? Layers, like a lasagna. The muck settled slowly, compressing over time into rich, oxygenated soil, stable enough to stand on but loose enough to dig with your hands. And don't forget the trees. At each corner of the Chinampa, farmers planted fast-growing willows called ahuejotes. Their roots helped bind the floating island in place, anchoring the soil and holding the edges together. Their trunks, too, could be harvested over time for poles, tools, or firewood. Every piece had a purpose. Every scrap was part of the design. You stroll to the edge of the Chinampa now, looking out across the canal. A long, low canoe slides silently. Past, paddled by a farmer with wide shoulders and a wide-brimmed straw hat. His boat is loaded with squash and amaranth. You exchange nods, one sleepy gardener to another, and he continues on his way. No words needed. Mainstream historical fact. These canals weren't just for ambience. They were essential highways for transporting crops, tools, and people. In fact, some researchers believe Tenochtitlan had more water-based traffic than roadways. A floating Venice. If Venice had fewer gondolas and more corn, the sun is up now, a soft lemon glow that turns the lake to gold. Dragonflies skitter over the surface. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing, a wordless melody that rises and falls like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. You lean on a pole, letting the quiet soak in, quirky detail for your midnight file. The Aztecs had floating compost boats. Seriously, they built miniature Chinampa rafts specifically to rot stuff on. Old corn stalks, fish guts, duck feathers, you name it. They dumped it there, letting it stew and ferment until it was good and ripe. Then they'd scoop the black sludge onto their garden plots like gourmet fertilizer. Talk about farm to table, but nothing about this was slapdash. In fact, here's your scholarly debate to chew on while the tomatoes ripen. Historians still argue whether Chinampas were truly floating or more like semi-permanent islands staked to the lakebed. Some say they rose and fell with the water levels. Others insist they were more fixed, with enough mass to be considered solid land. The truth? Well, it depends on the season, the depth of the canal, and how poetic you're feeling. You sit down, on a wooden crate, and watch a group of gardeners gather at the far edge of the next plot. They're chatting quietly, pointing at vines, measuring something with a cord. One of them laughs and slaps another's back. You get the sense that this is a social space as much as a work one. A workplace without meetings, just muddy boots and sun-warmed shoulders. You wish all jobs had ducks and tomatoes. Behind you, the tomato vines rustle in the breeze. The soil smells of things that used to be alive. Lake moss, fish bones, wet leaves, and things that want to be. Sprouting beans, little green shoots just poking through the surface, hopeful and sleepy. You breathe it in like incense. Aztec. Society prized Chinampa crops not just for their volume, but for their reliability. These gardens didn't flood, they didn't dry out. They weren't at the mercy of seasonal rains like hillside farms. In a land where drought could be deadly, the Chinampa was a kind of insurance policy. If you were lucky enough to own one, you were set. If you were a priest managing temple gardens, even better. Divine vegetables? Yes, please. There's a rustle. To your left, a small dog, hairless and warm-skinned, pads across the path and sniffs your foot. Erzoloitz Quintly, the sacred Aztec breed, prized for companionship and spiritual protection. He gives you one suspicious glance, decides you're not interesting, and trots off again, tail curling like a question mark. You stretch. The morning has fully arrived. Sun glints off the water. The tomatoes look smug with themselves, and your toes are beginning to dry out. Still, there's something deeply peaceful about this damp green world. No engines, no shouting. Just water, mud, sun, and the occasional dog, maybe the occasional compost boat. And you begin to realize, as you pluck a weed from between the tomato stalks and flick it into the canal, that this wasn't just farming. This was philosophy. Aztec gardening was an act of balance between land and water, control and surrender, decay and growth. So you pick up a basket, shake out the morning dew and begin harvesting, one tomato at a time. The basket in your hand begins to fill with tomatoes, some plump and firm, others split slightly at the seam, like they couldn't contain all the sunshine they soaked up this week. You don't rush. Each one is inspected, turned, felt gently between your fingers. The ripe ones are a deep, rich red with streaks of orange and gold, glowing softly in the morning light. You place them carefully into your reed basket, where they settle together like sleeping birds. Further along the row, someone else is harvesting squash, long, striped, and heavy. She nods to you in greeting, and you notice the small obsidian blade tucked into her belt. Not for self-defense, just for slicing vine stems with one clean cut. That's the thing about these tools. Elegant, sharp, and entirely Stone Age. No steel, no plastic, no motors humming, just human hands and volcanic glass, doing the work slowly, rhythmically. The Chinampas aren't quiet now, not anymore. Ducks quack and flap across the water. A pair of herons stand like pale statues near the far edge, heads cocked to catch fish. A young boy paddles by in a shallow canoe, his cargo a bundle of sugarcane and a basket of wild greens. He hums as he passes, half a tune with no words. You find yourself humming along without realizing. One mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you turn back to your harvest. The Chinampas weren't just used for food crops. Flowers played a big role too. Aztecs cultivated brilliant marigolds, dahlias, and morning glories, not just for beauty, but for religious ceremonies and dyes. Some gardens were purely floral, bursting with color and scent, feeding temples instead of kitchens. The gods, it seems, liked bouquets as much as banquets. You find a patch of herbs next, epazote and hoja santa, their leaves fragrant and unfamiliar to modern palates. You crush one leaf between your fingers and breathe in deeply. Sharp, spicy, slightly medicinal. It smells like ancient kitchens and forgotten stews. You wonder if these herbs flavored the emperor's breakfast. Probably not, but maybe. And here's your quirky fringe tidbit. Aztecs believed certain flowers could cause dreams. Xochipilli, the god of poetry and pleasure, was associated with a cluster of sacred plants believed to produce visions, morning glory seeds, mushrooms, even tobacco. Some Chinampa gardeners grew these under strict supervision, offering their harvest not to the market, but to the temples. Gardening, in that context, was a spiritual vocation. You weren't just a farmer, you were a supplier of visions. You pause at the end of the row to stretch your back. The sun's climbing higher now, and sweat has begun to bead at your temples. A soft breeze cuts through the heat, bringing with it the scent of wet leaves and lake mist. The fields shimmer, light bouncing from one plot to the next, as if the water itself is dreaming. You glance across the canals, admiring the patchwork of Chinampas laid out like a living quilt. Greens and yellows and browns, all threaded with the glinting blue of water channels. A few plots are freshly planted, their soil dark and damp. Others are halfway through their cycle, with vines climbing haphazardly over wooden supports. It's a farm, yes, but also an ever-changing mosaic. Historians still argue whether the Chinampas were part of a centralized agricultural system or managed more independently by local families. Some records suggest tight state control, with quotas and tax deliveries to the capital. Others imply a more relaxed arrangement, where neighborhood councils and temple administrators shared oversight. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, organized chaos, like so much of history. You watch a young man hauling a load of compost in a flat-bottomed canoe. He's shirtless, his skin gleaming with sweat and lake spray. He waves, and you return it, then tilt your basket to show him the morning's harvest. He gives a thumbs up, an old gesture in any era, and paddles onward. His boat leaves a soft wake behind it, rippling across the otherwise still canal. Back on the Chinampa, you kneel beside a squash blossom and watch a bee wobble its way inside. It's heavy with pollen, barely airborne. The petals flutter as it works, then close gently when it departs. Bees were welcome here. The Aztecs didn't keep hives in the way Europeans did, but wild stingless bees were respected. Some gardeners even left flowers specifically for them, believing they brought luck as well as pollination. You shift to another. Bed and begin plucking amaranth leaves, tender, red-veined and shaped like teardrops. They go into a second basket, carefully separated from the tomatoes. Amaranth was a staple crop for the Aztecs, valued for both its grain and its leaves. High in protein, fast to grow, and drought-resistant, it was the ancient world's answer to the superfood trend. Move over, quinoa. There's a faint splash nearby, and you look up in time to see a child jump from one Chinampa to another, landing with muddy feet and a grin. His mother shouts after him, exasperated but not angry. He disappears behind a row of maize taller than he is. Somewhere nearby, another child begins drumming on an empty gourd. The rhythm is irregular, but you find yourself tapping along. You stand at last, stretching your arms above your head. Your fingers are streaked with green and brown. Your legs ache, but it's the good kind of ache. The ache of meaningful work, of soil pressed into your skin and the sun painting your shoulders. You carry your basket to the canal's edge and set it down. The canoe returns, now half empty. The farmer reaches out to help you load your harvest, and the two of you work in companionable silence. Tomatoes, herbs, squash, amaranth, all carefully placed to avoid bruising. The boat shifts slightly under your combined weight, but stays steady. These canoes were made for this. So were you, maybe. You wipe your hands on your tunic and take a long drink from a gourd of rainwater. It tastes clean, cold, and faintly metallic. Somewhere far across the lake a bell rings. A temple signal, perhaps, or the start of the morning market. It doesn't matter. Here on the water, surrounded by floating gardens and pollinated dreams, time moves differently. You climb aboard. The boat pushes off. The harvest floats with you, toward the city, toward the future, toward whatever story comes next. The boat glides forward, slicing the surface of the canal like a needle through silk. Each stroke of the paddle sends small ripples chasing toward the banks, disturbing the reflections of willows, clouds, and passing birds. You sit low in the canoe, the morning's harvest at your feet, baskets of tomatoes, bundles of amaranth leaves, a gourd of herbs tied with twine. The rhythm of the paddle, the creak of wood, and the soft slap of water become a lullaby for your muscles, which are beginning to feel the full weight of the morning's work. Around you, other boats follow the same narrow lanes, canoes loaded, with maize, cacao, chilies, bundles of reeds. Some are rowed by families, others by solitary farmers or traders. A few boats drift lazily, as though waiting for time itself to catch up. Above it all, herons wheel and circle, crying sharp notes, into the otherwise mellow morning. The sun has now climbed high enough to kiss the tops of the temple towers in the distance. Tenochtitlan is waking. You feel it even here, beyond the Chinampas, beyond the causeways. There's a pull in the air, like the heartbeat of a city beating just a little faster with each new breath of light. A good day for trade, a bad day for dawdling. You round a bend and pass a floating shrine. Nothing elaborate, just a small clay figure nestled in a wooden frame, decorated with bright feathers and maize cobs. A farmer has left a few squash blossoms there, still dewy. It's a simple offering, but you pause and tap the side of your boat once, twice. A quiet thank you. Whether to the gods, the lake, or the Chinampas themselves, who can say? Here's your mainstream historical fact of the hour. Tenochtitlan's canals weren't just irrigation tools, they were transportation highways. Because roads in the city were narrow or crowded, most goods moved by water. Couriers, market, vendors, temple officials, all relied on this aquatic network. It's one of the reasons the Spanish were so astonished upon their arrival. They weren't expecting Venice with pyramids. You pass a government canoe, painted in bright vermilion and trimmed with feathers. The two paddlers wear matching blue tunics and carry obsidian-bladed paddles. An official sits cross-legged between them, a clay tablet balanced on his knees, stylus in hand. He's probably recording shipments or collecting taxes. You duck your head as you pass. He doesn't look up. Not all commerce is serene. Historians still argue whether these officials were benevolent bureaucrats or ruthless enforcers of a tightly controlled empire. Some sources describe Aztec tax collectors as efficient and just. Others suggest they were more like loan sharks, with feathers. Probably depends who you ask, especially if they lost a harvest to bad weather and still had quotas to meet. Further along, the water opens into a wider channel, and the bustle increases. Children paddle small rafts piled with marigolds. Two women laugh as they exchange chilies for cacao beans. A man carefully balances 3 crates of guinea pigs in his canoe, squealing and squirming with each sway of the boat. You're reminded suddenly that this isn't just a trade route. It's a community on water. You nudge your canoe toward the shore, toward the merchant docks that edge the city like the hem of a garment. A series of wooden piers jut out from the stone wall, some more crowded than others. You aim for your usual spot, narrow, shaded, but close to a regular buyer who deals in market produce. As you approach, a boy waves from the dock and throws you a rope. You catch it easily. The dock creaks as you step onto it, the wood warm beneath your feet. A woman, with ink-stained fingers, stands nearby, weighing dried beans on a small bronze scale. She glances up at your load, nods, and gestures you toward your usual stall space. She knows your harvest. You know her rates. No need for words yet. Trade is a language of gestures and trust. As you begin unloading, you notice something strange. One of your tomatoes is missing. A damp stem, an empty spot in the basket. You squint into the canoe. Nothing. Then a splash. A turtle blinks up at you from the water, a bit of red pulp smeared across its beak. You sigh. Enjoy it, you mutter. That was my best one. Quirky tidbit. The Aztecs believed turtles were sacred to the rain god, Tlaloc. In fact, turtles were sometimes offered at temple ceremonies as living vessels of water and renewal. Whether this one counts or just wanted a snack is unclear. Either way, you fed something divine or hungry. You begin arranging your goods on the low stone platform by your assigned market stall. Tomatoes go in a shallow basket lined with leaves. Amaranth is spread across a woven mat. Herbs are separated, grouped by type, and bundled with reeds. You take pride in your layout. A tidy display earns better attention, better offers. The market itself is still filling, but the signs of life are unmistakable. Hawkers shout their wares. Someone begins to play a reed flute. Children chase each other between stalls, weaving around legs and baskets. A cloud of chili smoke drifts from a food vendor's corner and your stomach rumbles. You forgot to eat again. Of course you did. A tall man with a feathered cloak passes by, inspecting goods with the bored expression of someone looking for something he doesn't quite need. He pauses at your table, taps an amaranth bundle with his knuckle, and raises an eyebrow. You give your best merchant smile, friendly, slightly aloof, as if this is all perfectly normal. It is, after all, for you. He haggles half-heartedly, and you let the price drop just enough. He leaves with his purchase, and you with a handful of cacao beans. Not bad for a start. Here's an open scholarly debate to stir your curiosity. Were the Aztec markets truly free and open, or were they tightly surveilled by state watchers and price fixers? Some records describe fierce competition and diverse goods. Others suggest set prices and official market supervisors. Maybe both were true. Freedom in form, but structure in shadow. You settle into your merchant rhythm. Greet, weigh, swap, smile. Repeat. The sun climbs, the stalls fill. The lake sparkles behind you and the day unfolds like a well-oiled scroll. You sold the amaranth by midday. The tomatoes last longer. You even managed to trade for a pair of fresh tamales and a chunk of soft cheese. You eat in the shade, watching the people come and go. Your basket finally empty, but your mind oddly full. Full of names, of colors, of gestures, of wind and water and stone, of the lake, of the gardens, of the turtle with tomato breath. You lean back against the wall and let the city buzz around you. For now you've earned a break. You rise from your shaded spot, dusting tomato seeds off your hands, and begin packing up the last of your wares, even the empty baskets. Some are kept for tomorrow's harvest, others will be returned to neighbors who loaned them. Bartering. Tools, like stories, often change hands without ceremony. The midday sun has passed its peak. It hangs just off-center now, painting the city in a brilliant wash of gold and shadow. The marketplace glows like a mosaic of motion, colorful tunics, shimmering feathers, painted pottery catching the light. You pause, drinking it in. This is Tenochtitlan at full volume. Before you head home, there's one last stop to make. The communal compost mound. You sling the used produce leaves into a sack and make your way there, stepping carefully to avoid the slippery stretch where a fishmonger spilled earlier. The compost heap isn't glamorous, but it's where Chinampas earn their future. Nothing is wasted. You pass a group of schoolboys practicing glyphs in the dirt with sticks, fancy ones, probably sons of officials. One of them draws a tomato with such flair you nearly stop to admire it. Nearly. Your compost sack is starting to smell like betrayal and breakfast. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Tenochtitlan had a surprisingly advanced waste management system. While not sewered like Rome, it used lake separation, composting, and removal crews who were paid in maize. The city's planners understood that sustainability wasn't optional, it was survival. A young girl jogs past you, clutching a jar of pulque and giggling. Her braid swings like a metronome. An old man calls out after her, maybe her grandfather, maybe just nosy. You smile. It's hard to stay grumpy in this city. There's always something happening. You finally reach the compost mound, a raised earthwork surrounded by woven reed fencing. It steams faintly, even in daylight. Two workers in saffron tunics rake the top layer, chatting quietly. You add your bundle to the pile, and one of them nods in thanks. He recognizes you. Good harvest? Decent, you reply. Tomato? Thief got one, he chuckles. Turtles pay no taxes. Maybe we should elect one. Wouldn't be worse than the last market inspector. You trade banter, then head to your boat. It bobs gently at the dock, still tied where you left it. You step aboard, baskets stacked neatly, and push off with a practiced shove. The canal welcomes you back like an old friend. The return trip is slower. Not because the current resists you, but because your limbs are beginning to complain. You paddle gently, letting the water do more of the work. Around you, the world hums differently than it did this morning. The light is richer, more textured. Shadows stretch like cats waking from naps. The Chinampas glow with the warm breath of afternoon. You glide past another farmer crouched low, his reed hat tilted forward as he ties climbing beans to a stake. He doesn't look up. You don't interrupt. There's a rhythm to this hour, and breaking it feels like talking during a prayer. Further ahead, a pair of boys leap into the canal, splashing wildly. One of them surfaces with a triumphant whoop, holding a fat fish in both hands. The other pretends to pout, then grabs his own reed spear and dives again. Their laughter rises into the air like birdsong, a strange but delightful fringe tidbit. Some Aztec farmers train dogs to help patrol their Chinampas, not as herders, but as bark alarms. These lean, intelligent dogs would raise a racket if thieves or rival farmers tried to poach from the gardens at night. Whether they were paid in leftovers or just enjoyed the drama is unknown. You pass your favorite Chinampa, the one with the flower rose, long ribbons of crimson and gold marigolds nodding in the breeze. No crops here, just beauty, Whoever owns, it is a romantic or a fool, maybe both. Still, you appreciate their artistry and then you're back. Your own plot rises ahead, just where the canal forks near the lily-covered bend. The willows lean over it like gossiping grandmothers, their branches brushing the surface. You steer carefully to the little dock, tie off the canoe, and begin to unload the baskets. You move more slowly now, not tired exactly, just full of the day's weight, full of tomatoes, trade, talk. You set the baskets in the shed, brush your palms clean on your tunic, and check the herb rack. Everything's still in place. The chili strings hang like crimson snakes. The maize is dry enough to grind by tomorrow. You're doing well. It's not riches, but it's survival with dignity. Historians still argue whether Chinampa farmers were landowners in the modern sense, or more like stewards of semi-public land. Some documents show deeds passed through families. Others suggest temple officials or city councils assigned plots seasonally. As usual, truth probably lies in the muddied middle. You kneel beside your bean patch, gently pinching off a few yellowing leaves. Then, with fingers still dirt-dusted, you scoop up a handful of lake muck and smear it between 2 rows of seedlings. It's not glamorous, but it works, rich with nutrients, smells like old rain and future feasts. You remember something your grandfather once said while plucking weeds: the garden doesn't care who you are, only how often you visit. At the time, you rolled your eyes. Now you nod silently. He was annoying. He was also right. You sit on the edge of the Chinampa for a moment, legs dangling, toes just brushing the water. The lake is quiet again. A breeze moves across it, lifting tiny waves that lap at the reeds. The sun is lower now, fat and honey-colored, inching toward the temple towers far across the water. This is the pause between tasks. The held breath before supper. You take it. You breathe deep. Let the scent of soil and water, of tomato vines and drying chilies fill your chest. A small dragonfly lands on your wrist, its wings catching the light. You don't move. It stays a moment, then lifts off again, its hum trailing behind it like a fading thought. You rise slowly and gather a few final things: a gourd of drinking water, a twist of tortillas left from breakfast. You nibble one as you check the compost. Bin beside the hut. The worms look happy. They're always happy. The light is turning golden now, the kind of light that makes everything seem kinder. You glance across your Chinampa and feel, what's the word? Not pride, not peace. Something quieter, something softer. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything you did today mattered. You lean against the post of your hut, gaze across the lake, and let the last of the sun warm your face. You wake before the birds do. Not because of duty, though duty certainly plays its part, but because of rhythm. Your body knows the patterns now. The tug of dawn light before it breaks, the cooling shift in the breeze, the hush just before a heron calls. It's like the lake is holding its breath with you. Your back protests as you stretch, vertebrae cracking like twigs. The mat under you is thin, but you're used to it. You rub your eyes and step out into the morning mist, still. Barefoot, still half in dream. The lake is mirror still. Your Chinampa glows faintly in the ghost light of pre-dawn. Time to begin again. You kneel beside the fire pit and coax the embers back to life. A few shavings of wood, a breath, a spark. Then the warmth returns. You place a flat clay comel over the flame and slap out a quick tortilla from the maize dough, wrapped in a cloth on the shelf. Your fingers move automatically. Today is not market day, today is maintenance. There's weeding to do, beans to tie, peppers to check. But first, breakfast. You smear the tortilla with a spoon of last night's black beans. Crumble a bit of white cheese from a neighbor's goat and fold it in half. It's hot, soft, and delicious. It's enough. Here's a mainstream historical fact to start the morning. Aztec Chinampas weren't just for vegetables. Farmers often interplanted flowers like marigolds and dahlias, not only for beauty, but to attract pollinators and repel pests. Some even kept small hives nearby to harvest stingless bee honey, though it was a rare treat reserved mostly for nobles and gods. You sip from your gourd of water, still cool from the clay jar, and look out over your little patch of floating earth. Mist curls between the willows, draping everything in softness. You can't see the city, not yet, only the quiet grid of gardens rising from the lake. It feels like a dream, like you've woken in the middle of someone else's painting. Your raft waits tied to a post. You untether it and step aboard with the grace of habit. The pole is smooth in your hands, worn from hundreds of mornings just like this. You push off and glide between Chinampas, heading toward the compost bank. It's time to refill your baskets, with mud and reeds to reinforce your borders. The air smells of water and slow decay, not unpleasant, just honest. You breathe it in and feel awake for the first time. A quirky fringe tidbit. Chinampa builders sometimes used human hair, collected from barbers, funerals, or family offerings, as part of the mix to bind reeds and mud more tightly. They believed it added strength and maybe memory. The gardens quite literally grew from the people who tended them. You reach the compost dock and begin scooping rich lake mud into your baskets, mixing it with fresh-cut reeds and a handful of ash from last night's fire. It's a slow, back-heavy process. Each shovelful smells like energy, like potential. Your hands are soon black to the wrists. You return to your Chinampa and begin the process of layering. Mud, reed, more mud. You build out the edges, reinforcing the shape of your land. The water laps gently at your ankles. It's messy, grounding work, the kind that leaves you sore but satisfied. You think again about how long it takes to make something permanent. Chinampas didn't appear overnight. They were coaxed into being season after season. First the stakes, then the woven mats, then the layers of mud and mulch and patience. It could take a year or more before the land was sturdy enough to support a full crop. You think about that when people call them floating gardens, as if they just appeared like lily pads. No, they're anchored in sweat and repetition. You pause to stretch your back, watching a heron stab at a fish nearby. It misses, then pretends it didn't want the fish anyway. You smirk. Birds have pride too. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. There's still more to do. You kneel among the bean rows and begin tying fresh growth to the stakes, careful not to snap the tender stems. The sun has crested the distant towers now, and golden light spills across your shoulders. It's going to be a hot one. You roll up your sleeves and keep working. Historians still argue whether Chinampas were privately owned or communally managed. Some accounts suggest family plots passed down through generations. Others imply a rotating schedule controlled by temple authorities or market guilds. As usual, evidence contradicts itself. Stone tablets praising family heritage beside tax. Codes implying no such thing. You reach for your water gourd and realize it's nearly empty. You make a mental note to refill it at the well near the central canal bridge, but first a break. You sit cross-legged in the shade of your maize stalks, sweat drying on your brow. You pull a second tortilla from your pouch and eat it slowly, watching the world blink into full morning. The lake is alive now. You can hear the distant thunk of paddles, the chatter of neighbors, the squawk of geese, the shouts of children playing at the edge of a raft. Somewhere far off, a drum begins to beat. The start of temple morning songs, or maybe just a bored priest practicing rhythms. Either way, it carries. You look around your Chinampa, your small slice of the floating world. The beans are climbing well, the chilies are reddening. The maize still needs another few weeks, but it stands tall. You exhale, long and slow. A dragonfly buzzes past your ear and startles a lizard sunning on the compost lid. It skitters away. You smile. These are your co-workers in their way. You stand, stretch, and dust off your knees. There's always more to do. Always another row to weed, another vine to stake, another stone to shift. But that's the gift of this life. You don't finish, you tend, you grow, you return, and tomorrow you'll do it again. You're headed to market today, not just for selling, but for soaking in the rhythm of the city. You pack early. A woven basket, frayed at the handles but sturdy, rests beside your feet. Inside go bundles of chilies, bright red and pungent. Tied with twine, tomatoes still warm from the sun. A small clutch of quilites, wild greens with a bite sharper than they look. There's also a handful of marigolds, partly for trade, partly for luck. You balance the load on your back using a broad woven strap across your forehead, and your knees adjust instinctively as you rise. The sun is barely up, just a warm blur behind the clouds, but already the world smells awake. Smoke, clay, river water, and the sweetness of corn dough steaming somewhere close. The path from your Chinampa to the main canal is a zigzag of narrow planks and reed-lined banks. It's not a journey you rush. With each step you pass more people. Women with baskets of tamales, old men with strings of dried fish, children carrying frogs in clay pots, probably for some temple game or offering. You nod to each one. A smile here, a raised eyebrow there. Language without words. You reach your canoe and push off into the slow green current. The paddle cuts water like a whisper, and the lake parts with silent deference. On both sides, Chinampas unfurl floating gardens bristling with life and color. Morning mist hugs the surface, swirling like breath on glass. Here's a mainstream historical fact to float on while you row. The central lake system around Tenochtitlan was connected by an intricate series of canals, bridges, and aqueducts. It was such an efficient water transport system that many residents went their entire lives without ever needing to walk farther than the nearest dock. You pass a temple on the shore, white stone glinting in the light, and bow your head slightly, not out of obligation, but habit. The gods here are everywhere, and while they don't mind being ignored, they never forget. The market comes into view like a low, rhythmic drumbeat of color and noise. Boats bob and bump as their owners tie them to mooring posts. You find an empty space, wedge your canoe between a vendor selling cacao beans and a woman with cages full of screaming parrots, and unload with the smooth speed of someone who knows how fast spots disappear. This is the heart of your world now. Tlatelolco. Market, a chaos so choreographed it feels like dance. Tens of thousands of people, maybe more, swirl through the stalls, each one chasing the day's promise. Sugarcane, feathers, obsidian knives, salt cakes, woven fans, honey ants, smoked turkey legs, gossip. Your stall is small but neat. You stack. The tomatoes like rubies. Place the chilies in a shallow reed tray and set the marigolds in a jar of lake water. Then you wait. You don't need to shout like the fishmonger. Your goods speak for themselves. A young scribe stops to sniff the greens. She frowns, impressed. Sharp, she mutters. You nod. She trades a wedge of sweet potato cake and a thin shell bracelet. Fair enough. A merchant offers to buy your whole basket, but you refuse. Not because you're stubborn, though maybe you are, but because you've seen him resell the same produce in the noble quarter for triple the price. You'd rather sell slower to those who cook their own food, a quirky fringe tidbit, since you're in the mood for trade secrets. Some Aztec vendors used market whistles, small reed instruments, shaped like birds or skulls, to signal to trusted customers across the noise. Each vendor had their own tune. Think of it as the original notification chime. You take a break, ducking behind your stall for a drink of atole, thick, warm, spiced with cinnamon and corn. A neighbor laughs as her tamale steamer hisses. She's been at this longer than you. Her laugh lines tell more stories than her mouth does. Historians still argue whether the markets were truly open to everyone or subtly segregated by class and profession. While records suggest shared spaces, there are hints, layout maps, tax tables, coded symbols on stall poles that imply a structure more complex than the casual observer might notice. Your feet begin to ache around midday. The sun has burned. Off the morning cool and the crowd thickens. A noble servant tries to cut in front of a laborer. You shake your head. Not here, not at your stall. A group of children runs past, shrieking with delight, one holding a bag of salted grasshoppers. You can't help but grin. That crunch is unforgettable. Later, a priest stops by, not in ceremonial robes, but in plain blue linen, carrying a bundle of crushed herbs. He eyes your caleats, sniffs them, and offers a story in exchange. These, he says, were once reserved for the old gods, fed to statues to ward off hunger in the stone. You nod slowly. I'll take that story, he smiles. Then I'll take the greens. You like this barter. The day begins to fade. You've sold most of your produce. Your basket is light. Your pouch is heavier. Not by much, but enough. A few cacao beans, a bit of cloth, a spool of cotton thread, a stone charm shaped like a frog. You didn't need it, but it looked like luck. As you pack up, the parrots next door begin to shriek louder. Sunset makes them rowdy. You push your canoe back into the water and paddle slowly, savoring the calm. Behind you, The market still hums, still flutters, still spins. But your piece of it is done. The sky glows peach and lavender as you drift between Chinampas. Your arms ache pleasantly. The frogs have started their songs. So have the crickets. You think about dinner. What's left in the clay pot at home? How much chili to add? Whether anyone will stop by. You breathe deep. The lake answers. The evening settles slowly around you, like warm cloth draped over tired shoulders. You return home just as the sky slips into a dusky mauve, streaked with faint orange at the edges. The Chinampa glows softly in the low light, shadows long and drowsy across the raised beds. Your canoe bumps gently against the dock, wood on wood, a sound so familiar you don't even notice it anymore. You unload your basket, lighter now but still fragrant with the day's labor. The faint scent of chili lingers on your fingertips, and your back reminds you with every movement that paddling and standing in the sun aren't hobbies. They're endurance sports disguised as chores. Inside your modest home, a reed and mud structure with a roof that creaks in just the right places, you set your pouch aside. Dinner is easy tonight. You light the hearth with flint and dry stalks, coaxing the coals back to life with a practiced breath. A clay pot of stewed beans and squash waits in the embers from earlier. You add water, a pinch of salt, and stir with the rhythm of someone who's done this every day since their hands could reach the rim of the pot. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on with your beans. Aztec Chinampa, households like yours, typically relied on a diet rich in maize, beans, squash, amaranth, and chilies. Animal protein was minimal for commoners, mostly insects, frogs, and the occasional duck or fish. Yet the nutritional balance of the three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, was remarkably complete. You slice a tomato from your leftover stock and toss it into the stew, marveling at how something so soft and fragile can hold so much taste. You don't think about it often, but you're lucky. Tomatoes don't grow on every Chinampa. They need just the right moisture, just the right shade. You've got the touch. As the pot simmers, you rinse your face and hands in a shallow bowl, letting the cool water erase the heat of the day. The frog chorus outside grows louder, croaky, rhythmic, almost choral. You smile to yourself. They always sing for supper. From the wall you take down a small woven mat and a gourd bowl. Simple, functional, yours. You ladle the stew with care, add a side of salted greens, and crumble a bit of amaranth cake on top like your grandmother used. 2. It's not fancy, but it's real. A breeze flutters through the window flap, bringing with it the scent of lake water and a faint puff of distant cooking smoke. Somewhere a family is roasting fish. Somewhere else, a lullaby drifts through the reeds. You eat slowly, spoon by spoon, letting your mind drift, a quirky fringe tidbit for your dinner hour. Some Aztec households believed that the steam rising from food carried stories upward to the gods, so meals were often eaten slowly, in silence, allowing time for those tales to reach the sky. Elders said it was rude to interrupt your food's journey with idle chatter. You finish the last spoonful just as the pot begins to hiss against the coals. Perfect timing. You scrape it clean and leave it in the corner for scrubbing tomorrow. Tonight is not for chores. Tonight is for resting bones and sipping warm epazote tea. Outside, the stars are just beginning to appear. You step out and stretch, arms reaching toward the heavens, vertebrae cracking like twigs. The lake is mirror still. You can see the sky twice, once above, once below. Dragonflies dance across the water. Bats swoop overhead. You return indoors and light a resin candle stub. The flicker makes the shadows on your reed mat dance. You lie back and listen. Historians still argue whether commoners like you ever truly felt free in the Aztec Empire. Tribute was heavy. Religion could be intense. War always hovered. And yet here on the Chinampa, with your plants and your stew and your frog choir, there is something like peace. Maybe it's not freedom in the modern sense, but it's rhythm, belonging, life well-rooted. You remember your father's voice, low and steady, telling stories about the first gardeners, those who built the islands, who learned the secrets of mud and willow and patience. He always said, "Plants listen, better than people. You just have to stay long enough to hear them reply." A knock at the frame startles you. Not many people come by after sunset. You rise, stretch again, and lift the flap. It's your cousin, damp from paddling, eyes wide with the excitement of gossip. "They're building another temple," she says, dropping onto the mat without waiting for permission. "By the western shore, big one, red paint. Full moon ceremony next month." You nod, pouring her a cup of tea. She sighs. "I hope they don't take more workers from here. Last time, they emptied our side of the lake." You both sip. Neither of you says much. But that's fine. Some nights don't need stories, they just need witnesses. As the candle burns low, she leaves with a murmur of thanks. You tidy the mat, blow out the flame, and lie back down. The frogs continue. The wind sighs. And you, Chinampa gardener, whose hands smell of earth and herbs, float in the darkness between dreams. It's a new morning, though it feels more like the echo of yesterday. That's the thing about life on the Chinampa. It repeats itself just enough to comfort you, but not so much that it bores you. You rise slowly, the mat creaking beneath. You and the smell of dew on soil reaches your nose before your eyes even open. Your joints crack, a quiet little symphony of effort. Outside, the air is soft and grey. Mist coils like smoke over the lake, wrapping the Chinampas in mystery. It's the kind of weather that makes sound travel strangely. Distant voices feel close, like the lake is whispering gossip from across the water. You step barefoot onto the packed earth and stretch toward the clouds. Your body responds with mild protest, but it always does that. The muscle remembers. You check on your crops. The amaranth is sprouting well, your maize stalks are steady, and the tomatoes, oh, the tomatoes are nearly bursting. You'll have to stake them again. They've got ambitions of their own, while you tie them upright. With split reeds, a little garter snake slithers past your foot. You greet it silently, nodding once. It flicks its tongue at you and vanishes between rows of beans. No drama. Just two workers passing in opposite directions. Here's a mainstream historical fact to chew on while you work. The Chinampa system was not just a marvel of agriculture. It was a form of microclimate control. The water surrounding the islands kept root temperatures stable and extended the growing season, making it possible to harvest up to 7 crops per year in some places. That's right, 7. You sit down on your haunches, wiping your forehead with a woven cloth. From a small pouch tied at your waist, you take a strip of dried squash and chew thoughtfully. The lake breathes around you, still steady, ancient. A canoe drifts past, the paddler waving lazily. You nod back, no need for words. The lake community understands each other through gestures and glances. That's how it's always been. As the sun climbs higher, the mist burns away, revealing distant smoke from temple fires and the faint outline of Tenochtitlan's temples on the horizon. You pause for a moment, watching the city float like a mirage in the haze. A quirky fringe tidbit for the day. Some Chinampa farmers believed that placing polished obsidian shards around the edges of their gardens would confuse plant-harming spirits, who'd become distracted by their own reflections and forget what they came for. Were the spirits vain? Who knows? But the gardens looked amazing. You finish staking the tomatoes and move on to your herbs. Epazote, wormseed, wild mint. These are your special corner. You don't sell much of them. They're more for trade, medicine, or the quiet satisfaction of knowing how to stop a cough with a tea made from leaves that grow right outside your door. Historians still argue whether individual Chinampa farmers operated completely independently or were semi-organized under neighborhood collectives. There's some evidence of both. Some families pooling resources, others guarding their plots like jealous owls. Either way, the work got done, and the tomatoes thrived. Around mid-morning, you hear a splash, then another. You walk toward the canal and see 2 children laughing, soaking wet, one holding a net made from reed fibers, the other clutching a slippery frog like its treasure. "Want one?" one of them asks you. You shake your head. Too early for frog stew. They giggle and paddle away in a half-sunk dugout canoe, leaving ripples and chaos in their wake. You smile after them. The lake never runs out of children or frogs or trouble. Back inside, you sort the morning's harvest. Some of the tomatoes go into a clay bowl. Others are wrapped in banana leaves to keep cool. You find 3 that are just barely bruised and mash them into a spicy salsa with a bit of crushed chili and salt, which you spread on a thin corn cake and eat slowly, eyes half closed. It's quiet today, not silent, but calm. A hawk circles overhead, Insects buzz softly. A dragonfly lands on your toe, considers it, then moves on. You decide to spend the afternoon repairing the edge of your chinampa. The willow roots need retucking, and some of the woven mats holding the mud have loosened. You wade into the water, murky but warm, and begin reshaping the edge with your hands. Mud squelches pleasantly between your fingers. This is the good kind, thick, black, filled with life. You remember your mother saying, "You want dirt that smells like old stories." This mud smells exactly like that. The work is slow, but meditative. Your muscles settle into the rhythm. Dig, pack, weave, repeat. You hum softly to yourself, something half remembered from childhood, a song about maize gods and dancing jaguars. A neighbor paddles by and tosses you a joke about how your chinampa's leaning like an old man. You laugh and throw a clump of mud at his canoe. He ducks, shouts something unrepeatable, and vanishes around the bend. You grin, proud. By sunset, your fingers are raw, your arms ache, but the chinampa edge holds strong. You admire your work, then pour a dipper of cool water over your head, gasping at the shock. It wakes up something deep inside your spine. You sit on the dock, legs dangling, watching the sky bleed orange and lavender. Fireflies blink in and out among the reeds. The frogs return to their chorus. You hum along, not quite on key, but loud, enough for the night to hear you, and just before you head inside, you whisper a little wish into the lake. Not because you believe in wishes, but because the lake seems like it's listening tonight. The next morning greets you with the sharp cry of a heron and the gentle plink of water dripping from an overhanging reed. You blink at the pale sky and wonder briefly whether it's still early or already too late for your first paddle around the Chinampas. Either way, you're up. Your legs swing over the edge of the sleeping mat and your feet meet the cool, smooth floor like old friends. You move through the morning routine without hurry, wetting your hair with lake water, chewing a handful of toasted maize kernels, and gathering your reed-wrapped basket of cuttings from the previous day. The earth still smells like night, damp and alive. It makes you pause, breathe deeply, and then head for your canoe. Today you're visiting your cousin who farms a chinampa 2 canals over. You owe him a bundle of epazote in exchange for a cutting of purple chili that supposedly repels the beetles, currently ruining your squash. Whether it works or not, you can't say, but it's worth the trade if only to keep the family peace. You pole your canoe slowly through the narrow waterways, the water glassy and green with morning algae. Fish dart beneath your vessel like shadows too shy to speak. You hear dogs barking faintly from the temple district and the ringing of bronze bells in the distance. The city is waking up. Mainstream historical fact to glide on. The canals between. Chinampas were essential, not just for transport, but for irrigation, defense, and even fish farming. Some Chinampa owners would raise small fish or crustaceans alongside their crops, creating a closed-loop ecosystem long before such things had a fancy name. Your cousin greets you with a whistle and a raised paddle. You dock your canoe beside. Hiss and hop onto the earth, exchanging bundles wordlessly. The purple chili is tiny and angry-looking, like it holds a grudge. He claims it's sacred to one of the lesser maize gods. You pretend to believe him. It's easier that way. You sit and share a mid-morning snack, cactus paddles grilled over a stone and wrapped around fresh cheese. He tells you about a storm rumored to be coming down from the northern hills. You nod. Storms mean more work, but also more water for the crops. Nature doesn't ask permission. On the way back, you pass a group of boys jumping from boat to boat, daring one another to leap farther each time. One lands short and splashes into the canal with a howl, emerging triumphant despite the duckweed in his hair. You remember doing the same once, a quirky fringed tidbit to chew on. Some farmers use floating scarecrows, simple wooden dolls tied to reeds, to deter waterfowl from their crops. The birds weren't always fooled, but the farmers insisted that the dolls worked better if you whispered threats into their ears first. Superstition or strategy? Who knows? Back on your chinampa, you plant the new chili cutting with careful hands, surrounding it with crushed eggshells and a soft prayer. You don't remember where you learned that ritual, but your grandmother swore by it. Something about eggs reminding the plant of life before soil. By midday, the sun turns fierce, and the lake reflects it like a mirror angled to blind you. You retreat to the shade of your shelter and repair a split in your canoe's hull. The work is tedious, weaving and sealing with pine resin, but your hands move confidently as if guided by ancestors peeking over your shoulder. Historians still argue whether Chinampa maintenance was passed down through formal training or simply absorbed through years of practice. There are no instruction scrolls, no official manuals, just old hands showing young ones and memories written in muscle. You remember a time, barely more than a whisper now, when you didn't know the difference between loamy mud and silt, when you thought tomatoes grew on trees and that Chinampas floated like lily pads. You smile at the memory, shake your head and return to sealing the canoe. Later, you dig a trench along the edge of your plot to redirect a bit of canal overflow. It's a back-breaking job, but the kind that rewards you instantly. A cool rush of water hurrying along the path you've carved, eager to please. You splash your face with a handful and feel the fatigue loosen. As the shadows grow long and the light goes syrupy gold, a neighbor calls across the canal. "Care for a trade?" she asks, holding up a bundle of squash blossoms. You examine your herbs and lift a handful of dried wild mint in return. The exchange is made via canoe paddle. Her bundle slid down the length of yours, your mint returned along hers. No words needed, just the shared economy of trust. In the distance, a temple drum sounds, low, rhythmic, insistent, a reminder of the city's heartbeat. It pulses through the water, through the air, even through the soles of your feet. You look toward the horizon and see the top of the main temple glowing with fire as the sun begins its descent. You light your own small fire, just a cooking one, beneath a clay pot filled with maize, beans, and a few pieces of dried duck. The aroma curls into the twilight, drawing the attention of a raccoon-faced creature slinking along the edge of your platform. You toss it a crust of flatbread. A peace offering. Night comes fast. It always does when the day has been long. You sit beside the fire, bowl in hand, watching the stars claim the sky one by one. You think about how each Chinampa is like a star, separate but linked, flickering over dark water, stubbornly alight. You finish your meal, rinse your bowl, and stretch your sore limbs. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins to play, a simple tune. Maybe a lullaby, maybe a prayer. You don't know the song, but you hum along anyway. The moon rises full and heavy, casting silver shadows across your plot. You stand quietly, hands at your sides, and listen to the lake. It speaks in ripples and frog song, in breeze and bulrush. You close your eyes, take one last breath, and feel the weight of the day melt down through your toes into the earth beneath you. The tomatoes sleep, the maize stands tall, and tomorrow waits patiently just across the water. You wake before the sun, roused by the quiet hiss of wind slipping between the reeds and the creak of your own bones, adjusting to the morning. The world is still blue, not yet colored by daylight, and there's a hush to everything. Like the lake is holding its breath, you rise and stretch, rubbing your eyes with the heel of your hand, as you blink toward the faint line of dawn behind the city's temple towers. A few early birds, literal ones, not the productive morning types your aunt always praises, dart overhead, their wings catching the pale light. You hear the faint sound of someone chanting across the water, probably an offering being made near the western causeway. You pause and listen a moment, letting it wash over you like warm tea. You shuffle toward your canoe again. Today is Compost Collection Day, a less glamorous but absolutely necessary part of Chinampa life. Your job is to row to the deposit site near the canal's edge and return with bundles of lake muck and decomposed vegetation to enrich your soil. It smells like a bog's armpit, but your squash will love it. Mainstream historical fact time. The Aztecs used lake sediment dredged from the bottom of the canals, rich in nutrients and decomposing organic matter, to fertilize their Chinampas. Known as mudcakes or lake-bottom soil, it made their system astonishingly productive, capable of yielding up to 7 crops a year in the best plots. You arrive at the compost site and greet an elder already elbow deep in the muck. His hands are covered in black paste, and his smile suggests he doesn't mind one bit. "Good for the roots," he grunts, handing you a bundle wrapped in woven reed matting. You nod and load it carefully into your canoe, trying not to think about how many eels just squirmed out of it. On your way back, you pass a ceremonial barge, draped in bright banners, with musicians aboard playing panpipes and a girl scattering flower petals into the water. A fertility blessing, probably. You keep your head low as they pass. Some moments aren't meant for interruption. Back on your plot, you dig out shallow trenches and spoon the compost in with a flat wooden blade. It's heavy work. Sweat trickles. Down your back and your arms ache. But the smell of the earth changing is its own kind of magic. You can almost hear the plants humming in anticipation, a quirky tidbit that gets passed around. Some farmers swore that talking to their tomatoes made them sweeter. Not prayers necessarily, just casual gossip. The theory was that the plants preferred to be included. You remember your cousin muttering about taxes and in-laws to a row of chilies once. They grew up fiery. By midday, you pause for a rest beneath your shade canopy, gnawing on a handful of salted pumpkin seeds and sipping tamarind water from a gourd. Your legs dangle off the platform into the canal. A fish nibbles your toe, and you yelp, nearly tipping your drink. You're not alone for long. A trader's canoe glides up, loaded with baskets of onions, papayas, and tiny green beans the length of a finger joint. He offers you a sample and tries to convince you they'll grow well in your corner plot. You're skeptical. He throws in a joke and a carved spoon as a bonus. You accept. Historians still argue whether Chinampa bartering was more communal or competitive. Some records suggest tight-knit networks of mutual aid, while others describe fierce rivalries, sabotage, and hoarding. Maybe, like the canals themselves, trade could change direction depending on the wind. That afternoon, you visit the flower plots to gather offerings for the market. Marigolds, dahlias, and the delicate white tzompantli blooms nod in the breeze. You cut each stem cleanly, bundle them in moist cloth, and tie with maguey fiber. You remember learning how to pick them without bruising the petals, your mother's hands guiding yours, her voice calm and full of stories about which flower was favored by which god and what offerings might carry the right kind of luck. Back home, you set the blooms in a shallow basket and sprinkle lake water over them to keep them fresh. You hum as you work, one of those old melodies no one claims to have taught you. Maybe it's just in the air here. The shadows stretch again, creeping across the platform like lazy snakes. You light a small bundle of sage to ward off insects and anything else that might want to linger uninvited. The smoke curls upward, mingling with the fading scent of blossoms and compost. You eat an early dinner of roasted maize and squash puree, then lean back to watch the sky change colors. First peach, then rose, then a deepening blue that seems to drink the world whole. Just as night fully settles, you hear something. A distant drumbeat. Not temple this time. Closer. You paddle out to investigate and find a floating celebration, just off the northern bank. Several Chinampas lashed together, people dancing, shouting, laughing. Someone pulls you in before you can protest, handing you a steaming cup of pulque and a skewer of spiced duck. You smile, raise your drink, and join the party. You spin once, then twice, your body remembering rhythms your head forgot. A child tugs your sleeve and offers you a small paper flower. For your garden, she says. You accept it solemnly and tuck it behind your ear. She giggles and runs off. Later, you drift back home, slightly unsteady but content. The moon is huge and yellow, riding low above the lake. You think of your plants, your plot, your compost, your day. The work never ends, but neither do the small joys. You lie back on your sleeping mat and let the world fall away, lulled by water and memory, by flowers and fire, by soil and sky. Morning again. Somehow the lake has changed overnight. Mist curls across the surface like silk unraveling, and the air smells of fish and lilies. You're not sure if it rained or if the night simply wept a little, but the Chinampa boards are slick with moisture, and your breath comes out in faint puffs. You start your day as always, checking the tomato vines, brushing the dew from the maize leaves, offering a nod to the small household altar tucked beneath a woven shade. A figurine of Xochipilli, the god of flowers, art and song, sits quietly there, garlanded with fresh blossoms. You add a few more, whispering thanks under your breath. Your squash doubled in size overnight. Coincidence? Maybe. But you're Not one to question blessings. Your task today is seed gathering. The amaranth pods are brittle and dry, their seeds like specks of obsidian. You pinch them carefully into a gourd, the soft rattle a comfort to your ears. Further down the plot, your beans are nearly spent. Curled brown husks hang like withered smiles from the vines. You pluck them one by one, careful not to drop a single seed. Mainstream historical fact alert: the Aztecs placed enormous importance on seed saving. Not only did it guarantee future harvests, but it also served as a sacred trust passed from parent to child. Certain families even had exclusive rights to specific seed strains, like a recipe only your bloodline could cook right. You remember your uncle once saying, "Every seed is a story waiting to be told." Of course, he also once claimed he could talk to frogs, so you took that with a pinch of salt. After the seed harvest, you turn to tool maintenance. Your digging stick, carved from seasoned mesquite, needs a new obsidian blade. You kneel by. Your supply basket. Choose a fresh flake and bind it in place with deer sinew and waxed fiber. The wrapping is precise, rhythmic, and oddly satisfying. A nearby neighbor, a wiry man named Tikol, paddles over with a gourd of fermented sap and a sly grin. "Help me harvest my chilies," he offers, "and I'll trade you a pouch of smoked salt." You agree because smoked salt is a treasure, and your chili rows still need time. You follow him to his Chinampa, smaller than yours, but overflowing with rows of bright red chilies, each one dangling like a flame. You pick in silence for a while, sweat beading on your brow. A bird calls somewhere above. A frog croaks. Somewhere across the water, a dog barks as if it's personally offended by the sun. Quirky tidbit: some chili growers believed the heat. Level of their peppers depended on the mood of the harvester. Angry hands made spicy pods, cheerful hands made mellow ones. No one's tested this, but it's enough to keep you smiling through the burn. As you work, Tikol talks about his cousin's new canoe, about the temple procession next week, about the time a coyote swam out to his platform and stole a basket of fish. He exaggerates, sure, but you don't mind. It fills the space. After the harvest, you sit together beneath a canopy of drying reeds and snack on maize cakes, dusted lightly, with that prized smoked salt. It tastes like fire and thunder. You trade a few amaranth seeds for it, and both of you leave feeling like you got the better deal. By early afternoon, your path takes you toward the canal market, a floating bazaar of small boats and larger platforms, lashed together, bobbing gently in the current. You don't need much, but the trip is its own kind of reward. Laughter bounces across the water. Traders shout their wares: copper bells, cacao beans, baskets of mango and sapote, bundles of colored thread. You pick up a tiny obsidian pendant shaped like a frog. It reminds you of your uncle, the one with the amphibian diplomacy. The seller throws in a painted gourd stopper when you compliment her embroidery. A fair trade. Historians still argue whether these markets were strictly managed or loosely regulated chaos. Some records describe detailed taxation systems and inspectors with feathers in their hair. Others suggest it was mostly honor-based, relying on shared customs and reputation. Maybe both were true, depending on who was watching. You linger at a musician's stall, a boy barely older than 12 with a panpipe and a voice like river glass. He sings a song about lost islands and floating gods. A few listeners drop coins in his basket. You drop a flower. He nods. On the paddle home, you drift for a moment, letting the canoe rock gently. The water is calmer than it's been in days, like the lake itself has exhaled. You trail your fingers through the surface. It feels cold and ancient, like touching time. Back at your plot, you stow your purchases, check the tether lines, and sweep the boards with a bundle of stiff reeds. You rest for a moment, then rise again. The Chinampa calls. It always does. You pull your hoe from the storage rack and begin breaking the crust on a new planting row. The soil is rich, the scent almost sweet. Each stroke sends up a puff of dust and the occasional startled beetle. You move with intention. This is where new things begin. As dusk approaches, the shadows creep again, long and liquid. You light your torch, a simple oil dish, and place it near your mat. The wind shifts, carrying hints of flowers and firewood, laughter and hush. You lie back again, the frog pendant clutched in one palm, the day slowly sinking into memory. Tomorrow you plant. The morning mist hasn't even lifted when you rise. The lake, wrapped in gauze, feels like a dream barely remembered, soft, silver, and silent. You move carefully across the planks of your Chinampa, each step placed with the reverence of a priest in ceremony. Today is a planting day, and planting days begin with quiet. You start by smoothing the furrows you made yesterday, your hoe gliding through the damp earth like a knife through ripe fruit. The smell is strong, black soil, algae, composted roots, all tangled into something fertile and slightly musky. It's the scent of possibility, or mold, depending on how optimistic you feel before breakfast. You reach for your seed pouch. Amaranth, maize, and of course the tomatoes, carefully dried, selected, and blessed by habit, if not by ritual. You take a moment, as always, to whisper a few words into your palm before planting, something between a hope and a promise. 1. Kernel 1 Future. Mainstream historical fact incoming. The Aztecs were highly methodical in how they spaced and rotated their crops, often using companion planting principles that helped maintain soil health and pest control. Maize, beans, and squash, known as the Three Sisters, formed a cornerstone of sustainable Mesoamerican agriculture. The maize grew tall, the beans climbed the stalks, and the squash sprawled across the base, shading out weeds. It was a botanical group hug. You follow that model. First the maize spaced a handspan apart, then a bean at the base of each stalk to be. Then squash seeds, dropped with a little more ceremony, because squash are stubborn and like to feel important. As you work, the sun slowly burns through the mist, unveiling the day in layers. First a shimmer on the water, then the outline of distant trees, then the full chorus of birds, frogs, and the occasional human yawn across the canal. You're halfway through your tomato row when you hear the thunk of a paddle. You glance up. It's a priest from the nearby temple, clad in white, cotton, his face painted with lines of blue and red. He brings offerings, flowers, cacao, and a clay tablet marked with glyphs you don't pretend to understand. He hands you the tablet and gestures toward the Chinampa. "Bless the ground," he says, "for the feast of Tenochtitlan." You nod. You'd forgotten the date. Tenochtitlan, god of fire and time, has a feast day tied to agricultural renewal and hearth rituals. You'll need to burn a pinch of maize flour and drop a few flower petals into the lake. No problem. You've got petals for days. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztec farmers believed the first planting after the festival determined the fortune of their entire crop cycle. They'd wear their luckiest sandals, face the sunrise for the first seed, and avoid speaking until the 5th hole was dug. You're not quite that superstitious, but you do hum a little tune while planting just in case. The priest leaves as silently as he came, vanishing down the canal like a heron. You place the clay tablet on a flat stone near your altar. Later, maybe you'll try to decipher the symbols. More likely, you'll just admire the craftsmanship. Midday arrives hot and still. The lake turns to glass. You retreat to the shade of your reed hut, peeling a slice of salted squash jerky from a pouch and chewing slowly. It tastes like smoke and soil, like something meant to last. Across the water, you see other farmers tending their own Chinampas. One is stringing gourds along a trellis. Another is shouting at ducks. A third has fallen asleep, wide hat tilted over his face, arm draped protectively over a basket of radishes. The community hums along. Each plot its own verse in the song of survival. Historians still argue whether the Chinampa system was a spontaneous peasant innovation or a state-directed infrastructure project. Evidence exists for both. Temple decrees, laying out layout rules and oral histories, describing farmers experimenting by trial and mud-stained error. Like most things, it was probably a mix. Central plans interpreted through local genius. Your genius today comes in the form of shade cloth. You stretch it over your tenderest new sprouts, protecting them from the fiercest afternoon rays. As you anchor the corners with stones, a dragonfly lands on your thumb. You freeze. Its wings shimmer green and gold, thin as smoke, strong as silk. It lingers a moment, then vanishes. That feels like a good omen, or maybe just a thirsty bug. Either way, you smile. In the late afternoon, you paddle a short distance to visit your cousin's plot. He's built a scarecrow of reeds and old cotton scraps, its face painted with exaggerated scowls. It's adorable and entirely ineffective. Birds sit on its arms like it's hosting a feathered tea party. You help him harvest a few baskets of green beans, chatting about the coming market day. Rumors swirl of a visiting trader with copper jewelry and strange fruits from the southern coast. You wonder what southern coast fruit tastes like. Probably smug. Before sunset, you return home and complete the planting. Your hands are streaked. With dirt, your back aches, and your brain feels as baked as the soil. But the rows are full, the earth is ready. You light a small fire at the altar and scatter a pinch of flour into the flames, just as tradition suggests. The smoke curls upward, joining the rising night, carrying your quiet prayer with it. Then you sit. You sit on the edge of your Chinampa, bare feet dangling over the water, the sky bleeding from gold to purple to deep, infinite blue. Stars prick. The sky one by one like shy gods peeking through a curtain. Tomorrow will bring weeds and worms and weather and work. But tonight the lake is still. Your tomatoes are sleeping. And so, soon, will you. You wake with the birds, your dreams still stuck to your skin like dew. The lake is hushed this morning. No wind, no paddle strokes, just the slow creak of your hut's roof settling into another day. You stretch, yawn like a jaguar, and pad, barefoot to the edge of your Chinampa. It's inspection day. You don't call it that out loud, but it's what you do. Circle your floating island like a general on patrol, eyes narrowed for intruders. Beetles, blight, or especially bold ducks. You catch one pecking at your amaranth sprouts and throw a clump of wet moss in its direction. It flaps off, offended. You mutter a curse about duck stew and continue your rounds. The tomatoes are thriving. The first green nubs have begun to appear, tucked shyly under fronds like they're not sure about this whole ripening thing. You smile. Each tiny globe is a promise, a slow-blooming future, mainstream historical fact for your stroll. The Aztecs didn't just grow tomatoes for food, they recognized their medicinal uses too. Certain varieties were used in poultices for sore muscles or brewed into tonics to cool the blood. They even believed tomatoes could balance the body's internal heat, which, given the climate and their chilly habits, seems fair. You crouch low to inspect a few of the plants more closely. One vine looks sad, leaves yellowing, drooping like it's had a rough night out. You press a finger to the soil, too damp, you'll ease up on watering tomorrow. The lake has moods, and today it's a clingy one. From across the canal you hear someone singing, a harvest song, slow and rhythmic, like paddling in sound form. You hum along as you work, pulling weeds with practiced ease. Your fingers move, faster than your thoughts, which is a rare and blessed relief. Quirky tidbit. Aztec farmers sometimes hung small clay whistles in their Chinampa gardens to scare off birds. The breeze would animate them, filling the air with eerie little chirps. That sounded like a haunted petting zoo. You tried it once. Your whistles all cracked in the sun and made noises like sad hiccups. Still points for effort. You pause for a snack, a cold tamale and a few slices of pickled cactus. The brine makes your face scrunch up, but the crunch is satisfying. Food tastes better when your feet are dirty, that's not a proverb. Just a fact. A canoe approaches, gliding smooth across the morning water. It's your friend, the one who trades gossip as freely as he trades seeds. He's brought something today, wrapped in palm fronds and tied with red string. He hands it to you with a grin. "Gift from my cousin," he says. "She says it'll make your tomatoes blush faster." You raise an eyebrow. "Witchcraft?" "Compost," he says, then winks. "But blessed compost." You accept it solemnly. "My tomatoes accept your cousin's mysterious goo." He stays for a while, swapping stories and seeds. He tells you about a farmer whose Chinampa floated into the wrong canal and caused a polite but pointed territorial dispute. You laugh. Turf wars on rafts, only in Tenochtitlan. By midday, the sun turns sharp and glassy. You retreat to the hut for a siesta, the air thick with warmth and silence. Even the insects sound sleepy. You lie on your woven mat, watching shadows crawl across the reed walls, and let yourself float into a half-dream, half-thought haze. Historians still argue whether Chinampa farmers operated as independent laborers or worked under strict temple quotas. Some evidence suggests community groups rotated responsibilities and shared tools, while other records hint at seasonal levies imposed by the elite. You suspect the truth, like your compost, is a sticky blend of both. When you wake, the sky is veined with streaks of amber and rose. The wind has picked up just enough to ruffle your hair and stir the lake's skin into ripples. Time to finish your duties before dusk folds over the city. You paddle out to harvest water lilies for your altar, white blossoms that only bloom for a few hours, as fleeting as good jokes or ripe avocados. You place them gently in a shallow dish near your hut's entrance, an offering to the gods, the lake, and maybe even your past self, the one who didn't know how to make tomatoes grow. As twilight settles in, you sit on your wooden step and clean your tools. The rhythm is familiar. Scrape, rinse, dry, repeat. Like brushing your thoughts into neat little rows, the stars begin to bloom again above you, and somewhere nearby, a flute plays a wandering tune. You don't know who the musician is. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a spirit, maybe just the wind through a hollow reed. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. Your Chinampa floats steady beneath you. Your crops are rooted in mud and willpower. Your hands are sore and proud. Tomorrow there will be more to do. Always. But tonight, there is tea made from mint leaves and lemon grass, a soft blanket, and a sky wide enough to hold your hopes. You sip slowly, breathing steam, and listen to the lake breathe back. The air cools faster now, chasing the last light from the sky as your breath starts to fog gently in front of you. You tuck your feet under a blanket and cradle your tea bowl, the scent curling up, lemony and green, a final gift from your little herb patch. The lake is still again, as if holding its breath for the stars to arrive. The city hums behind you, far off yet present. Cooking fires crackling, distant drums from a festival you forgot was scheduled tonight. The occasional bark of a dog determined to defend its territory against the moon. But here on your floating island, everything feels contained, softened. Not silent exactly, just agreed upon. The moon rises late tonight, dragging its pale reflection across the water's skin. You watch it for a while, your eyes tired, but content. The Chinampa creaks gently beneath you. It's easy to forget it floats sometimes, feels so solid when you're digging, planting, harvesting. But now under the stars, it reminds you of its nature. Rooted, yes, but still drifting just a little, like a thought you never quite say out loud. You smile. The tomatoes will be red soon. The amaranth's almost ready to harvest. Your friend's weird compost might actually be working. You make a mental note to thank the cousin if you ever meet her, and to ask what else she's been feeding her soil. Mainstream historical fact for the Star Watchers among us. Chinampas weren't just marvels of agriculture. They were marvels of urban planning. Archaeologists estimate that up to 1/5 of Tenochtitlan's food supply came from Chinampa systems. These plots were so efficient, they could support multiple harvests per year. It's one of the reasons the city could feed a population approaching 200,000. No small feat in the 15th century. You stretch, joints popping like old tortillas on a hot stone. One more thing before bed. The journal. A scrap of bark paper, edges curled, ink made from crushed insects and soot. You jot down today's notes. Not about the harvest, about the duck, about the compost, about the flute that returned again at twilight. Small things, maybe, but they matter. They're the shape of your life. Quirky tidbit to end your day. Some Chinampa farmers were also part-time poets, not the kind who performed in great halls or at the temples. Just quiet scribblers who liked to leave little verses carved into trees or painted on clay jugs. Love poems, jokes, tiny odes to fish or mud. One archaeologist even found a Chinampa, paddle etched with a haiku-like phrase, "This side paddles me, the other pushes away, both carry my heart." You glance down at your own paddle, leaning beside the door, tempting, but your handwriting's terrible. Inside your hut, the fire has burned low. A few coals glow under the clay hearth. You curl into your mat, blanket drawn up to your chin, and stare at the roof beams. You know every knot, every spider web. You built this place plank by plank, You grew into it. It grew into you. Historians still argue whether Chinampas were fully private farms or managed communally under neighborhood alliances. Did you really own your patch of lakebed? Or were you just borrowing it, adding your labor to a centuries-old rhythm of digging, planting, tending, harvesting? You think maybe the lake owns everything. And it's generous, but only if you show up every day and listen. A breeze slips through the cracks in the wall, bringing the faintest scent of orange blossom from somewhere upstream. You drift in and out of sleep as the sounds of night deepen, the croak of frogs, the splash of fish, the low murmur of someone singing across the canal. The world turns gently, without asking your permission.